The ash from the burning sky drifted like snow, only hotter and far more bitter. Everything stank of plasma burns, blood, and the kind of smoke that only comes from 1,000 dead ships breaking apart above your head. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were what was left after the war had chewed through every trained fighter and spat out the desperate ones still standing. I sat behind a half-collapsed barricade made out of old transport crates and the remains of a drop pod. My rifle was overheating, patched with scrap wiring and a prayer. The power cell had been recharged so many times, the meter was lying. Still, I clutched it like it was the last piece of God left on this dying rock. Maybe it was. The transmission had come an hour ago, a smooth, echoing voice that barely hid its arrogance. The Zareth commander, those tall, glass-boned bastards with faces that never showed emotion, had broadcast their offer across all frequencies. Surrender now. Be spared. Kneel, and be allowed to live under their rule. A couple of the younger ones, especially those from the outer colonies, actually considered it, not out loud, but you could see it in their eyes. The fear, the hunger, the fatigue that breaks a man's will before a bullet ever does. But most of us just listened to that transmission and laughed. I lit a smoke with fingers still bandaged from the last close combat. The guy next to me, Warren, an old miner-turned-gunner, missing half an ear, let out a low whistle and spat a tooth he'd been nursing all morning. "They really think we'll just roll over," he muttered. "Let 'em think it," I said. Makes reloading feel even sweeter. Our commanding officer had been killed 3 days ago. Since then, leadership rotated based on whoever shouted the loudest and didn't get shot mid-sentence. I wasn't a leader, just another bastard with too much stubbornness and not enough sense. But people had started looking my way when it got quiet. Maybe because I still kept shooting. The aliens didn't understand us. They couldn't. To them, war was strategy, technology, clean lines, precision kills. To us, war was dirt, blood, rage, and holding on even when everything told us to let go. They had better weapons, better armor, and a planet-sized ship parked in orbit like a damn god looking down on us. But we had spite. And that was something no species had been able to crush out of humanity. Not in all their attempts. Just before dusk, their scouts came. Not a full wave, just a dozen silver-armored figures scanning for weak spots. We let them get close. We didn't have the firepower for long range anymore. And besides, we liked seeing the look in their eyes when they realized humans weren't running. When I gave the signal, a half-dozen rifles cracked through the smoke. Warren launched his homemade grenade, made from scrap explosives and old mining charges, and it hit one of them square in the chest. The explosion lit up the ruins and sent metal limbs flying. But one of them survived, barely. It crawled toward us, dragging itself by one good arm, its faceplate cracked, leaking that strange blue fluid they called blood. I walked out to meet it, rifle hanging loose at my side. "You were warned," it wheezed, voice glitching. I knelt beside it, watching it twitch. "So were you," I said, then shoved my boot into its face and ended it. As night settled in, the last of the heat faded from the battlefield. Fires burned in the distance, lighting the sky like a broken sunset. The stars above blinked through the smoke, and somewhere beyond them, their command ship waited for our answer. I looked around at the men who remained. Tired, hungry, wounded, but not broken. "We reload," I said, loud enough for them to hear. "We reload and we remind those freaks that we're not some species bred to kneel." Nobody cheered. Nobody needed to. We just started checking our weapons, passing out rations, bandaging wounds that would never heal right. Tomorrow, they'd come again. And when they did, we wouldn't surrender. We'd laugh and reload. The cold came in fast that night. Not the kind of cold you feel in your bones, but the kind that gets inside your thoughts, tries to twist them into something weaker, quieter. The kind that tells you maybe they were right. Maybe surrender wouldn't be so bad. At least you'd be warm. But then you'd remember what surrender meant. It didn't mean peace. It meant being paraded like cattle, stripped of everything that made you human, bent over beneath creatures who saw you as beneath livestock. Surrender meant slavery, plain and simple, working in their sterile, airless factories, mining their toxic rocks while they monitored your every move. It meant being turned into a number, a useful resource. So yeah, we stayed cold. I sat against a shattered column that used to be part of a defense tower. Its top half lay half a kilometer to the south, snapped clean off like a twig. My gloves were torn, and blood had dried in the creases of my knuckles from where I'd punched a Zereth trooper to death the day before. Not the smartest move. Their armor wasn't made for fists. But at that point, I wasn't trying to be smart. I was trying to stay human. Warren was building something again. That man could make a bomb out of duct tape, motor oil, and old chewing gum. Right now, he was hunched over what looked like a broken comms dish, some old wiring, and a box of nails. "What the hell is that?" I asked, lighting a smoke. Only had 4 left. Had to ration them like ammo now. "Landmine, kinda." He didn't look up. "Step on it, and it doesn't blow up. Not right away. It just triggers a delay, and then a shrapnel burst comes out a second later. Screws with their movement sensors." I nodded. He'd probably kill 3 of them with that thing tomorrow, minimum. Further down the trench, Gavlin was sharpening his knife with a flat piece of metal. He didn't speak much. He was a dock worker before the invasion. Lost his son in the first orbital strike. Kid was 11. Gavlin hadn't smiled since, and he didn't cry either. He just kept showing up day after day, stabbing anything that got close enough. He looked up. "You think they're coming in the morning?" I blew out smoke, watching it curl toward the cratered sky. "Yeah, they're losing patience. We're not supposed to still be here." He nodded. That was the end of the conversation. With Gavlin, you got what you needed in 10 words or less. The night dragged on, and sleep came in short bursts. 5 minutes here, 10 there. You learned not to trust real sleep. Real sleep got you killed. If your mind slipped too deep, you might wake up to a knife between your ribs, or worse, not wake up at all. Around a 300 hours, the scouts returned, ours this time. A pair of twins from the eastern bunkers, lean and quiet. They moved like shadows and carried old long-range rifles that had no business still working, but somehow did. "They're mobilizing," the older twin said, brushing dust off her face. 3 cruisers landed outside the perimeter. Looks like they're setting up artillery." Artillery. That meant they were done asking us to surrender. They were ready to flatten everything and leave nothing behind. Burn the earth. Salt the soil. "Any chance of air support?" I asked, knowing the answer. She shook her head. "Nothing in the sky except them. We're alone." Of course we were. The command structure had collapsed 2 weeks ago when Earth's last orbital platform got taken out. No signals were coming in, no backup arriving. This wasn't part of the war anymore. This was after the war, the part nobody writes about. The part where the survivors either die slow or fight dirty. "All right," I said, rising to my feet. My knees cracked like dry branches. "We don't wait for them to get comfy. If they're setting up artillery, we hit them first." There was silence for a few seconds. "You mean go out there?" one of the younger guys asked. His name was Rig, new blood, fresh out of one of the colony schools before the fall. Smart kid. Still had hope in his eyes, which probably meant he was going to die soon. "Yeah," I said. "Exactly that." They were setting up to break us, to end this whole stand with a single barrage. That's how they fought. Remove obstacles with overwhelming force, But setting up artillery meant time, logistics, precision. We could screw with that. And that's what humans were best at, screwing up someone else's perfect plan. By Oro 400, we'd gathered what gear we had. Warren had rigged 3 of his delay mines. Gavlin had duct-taped 6 grenades to a rolling mech wheel with a timer. The twins had marked the enemy's new positions, about 2 clicks out, across open ground littered with debris, collapsed bunkers, and the burned-out shells of old tanks. We moved under the broken moonlight, low to the ground, covered in dirt and shadows. Every step was a gamble. But the Zareth were arrogant. They assumed we were too beaten to counterattack. They expected rats, not wolves. We reached the edge of a ravine that overlooked the landing site. Sure enough, 3 long, skeletal artillery rigs stood in a loose triangle. Dozens of Zareth moved around them, pulling cables, setting up energy coils, doing whatever their kind called work. Warren grinned. Looks like Christmas came early. We split up. I took Gavlin and one of the twins left, circling around the outer perimeter, while Warren and Rig took the right flank. The plan was simple. Cause chaos. Destroy what we could. Make them bleed. No fancy tactics, just raw human rage. When the first explosion hit, one of Warren's delay mines under a power generator, the sky lit up like a second sunrise. Screams echoed through the valley. The Zareth panicked, as they always did when the unexpected happened. That's when we moved. I sprinted down the incline, firing my rifle at anything that moved. Gavlin was next to me, knife in one hand, sidearm in the other. The twin behind us took out 2 engineers with clean, silenced shots. By the time we reached the first artillery rig, we were drenched in sweat and blood that wasn't ours. I slapped a thermal charge onto the base of the gun and ran. 5 seconds later, it went up in a burst of heat and shrapnel that tore a hole in their formation. Across the field, I saw Warren's wheel bomb roll under another rig. A moment later, it exploded, sending steel and fire skyward. We didn't kill them all. Hell, we didn't even take out all 3 guns. But we ruined their setup, damaged their pride. And that was enough. By the time we made it back to the trench, we'd lost one of the twins, the younger one. Took a plasma bolt to the throat during the retreat. Her sister didn't say a word. Just sat down in the mud and sharpened her rifle bayonet in silence. Nobody spoke for a while. Finally, Gavlin broke it. You think that was worth it? I looked out over the horizon. Smoke rose from the Zareth camp like a middle finger aimed at the stars. Yeah, I said. They wanted surrender. We gave them shrapnel. Warren chuckled. Rig didn't. The kid was shaking, hands trembling. You did good, I told him. I was scared, he said, voice cracking. Good, I replied. Means you're still human. We patched our wounds, redistributed ammo, and waited for dawn. We knew they'd retaliate. Hard. That was the point. But something had shifted. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were an infection in their perfect machine. And the more they pushed, the more we pushed back. That was the part they didn't get. You couldn't just exterminate humans like pests, because every time one of us fell, the rest got meaner. Dawn came, blood red and broken. The sun crawled over a landscape of ruined cities, shattered steel, and scorched earth. And yet we were still here. We'd given them our answer, and they'd heard it loud and clear. We didn't get to enjoy the victory for long. By midday, we heard the shriek of engines tearing through the sky. Zareth gunships, 3 of them, sweeping in low like vultures over a battlefield. They weren't here to negotiate or scout. This was retribution. We scrambled. No time for plans, just instinct. I shouted for cover, diving behind the collapsed steel wall of an old mech bay as a burst of plasma ripped across the trench line, vaporizing the topsoil and 2 of our last standing turrets. The first blast hit near Gavlin's position. I saw the fireball bloom and thought he was gone. But a few seconds later, he emerged, limping, one arm wrapped around a wounded comms operator whose name I'd never even learned. The kid was half burned, barely conscious, but Gavlin didn't let go. He dragged him through the smoke like a man possessed. "They're softening us up," Warren shouted, ducking beside me. "They're gonna land again soon. Finish the job." "Let them try," I muttered, loading my last full mag. Another explosion rocked the ground, this one closer. Chunks of earth and metal rained down, clanging off the barricade like angry hail. We were getting shredded. No shields, no reinforcements, no air support. All we had were half-broken weapons, sandbags, grit, and hate. And still, none of us ran. We could have. The back routes through the ruins were open. We could have slipped out into the wastelands, gone dark, tried to survive somewhere else. But no one suggested it. Not even once. Because this place, this broken stretch of mud, blood, and fire, was ours now. We'd bled too much into it to walk away. The next gunship came in low, its sleek, silver form glinting in the dim sun. I saw the cargo bay open mid-air. Troopers dropped out like insects, at least 20 of them, hitting the ground in tight formation, plasma rifles at the ready. Zareth soldiers weren't like us. They didn't scream when they charged. They didn't talk, didn't rage, didn't show fear. They just advanced like machines, precise and cold. Warren tossed me his last thermal grenade. "Use it well, brother." I didn't respond, just pulled the pin and waited. When the first squad crested the ridge, I rose from cover and lobbed the grenade straight into their formation. It landed right at their lead trooper's feet. For a split second, he looked down, probably trying to calculate if it was a threat. Too late. The explosion tore him in half and sent 2 more flying. Screams, real, panicked screams, broke out across their ranks. Not human voices. Zareth voices. Twisted, high-pitched screeches that meant pain and confusion. Music to my ears. Rig was beside me, firing wildly, eyes wide with terror but hands steady. He dropped 3 of them before a plasma bolt caught him in the side. I grabbed him and pulled him back, but he was coughing blood already. "Stay with me," I barked. His lips were pale. Did I do good?" "Yeah," I said, "you did real good." He died before I finished saying it. Another explosion. Gavlin roared like an animal, charging a group of Zareth with nothing but a blade and a broken rifle. He took down 2 before they overwhelmed him, but he didn't scream. He didn't beg. He fought until his last breath. We were down to half a dozen by the time the second wave hit. That's when the unexpected happened. The last Zareth gunship took a hit, a direct one, from above. A streak of red fire cut through the clouds, and a ballistic missile slammed into the gunship's hull, blowing it apart mid-air. Flaming wreckage spiraled down, crashing into the far side of the battlefield with enough force to shake the ground. For a moment, everyone froze. Even the Zareth stopped firing. Then a voice came over comms, scratchy, old, barely functional. "Echo 3 to ground holdout. You still breathing down there?" I couldn't believe it. My throat locked up. "This is ground holdout," I answered, grabbing the cracked comms panel from the fallen operator. "Who the hell are you?" "Last of the orbital survivors. Been drifting in debris fields for 2 weeks. Found a missile platform still active and decided to put it to good use. You look like you could use the help." I laughed. Not out of joy. Just pure disbelief. Someone was still out there. Someone human. "We're down to less than 10. No heavy weapons. Ammo's low. If you've got anything else, now's the time." "Copy that," the voice said. "Brace for a gift from the sky." A minute later, another streak dropped. This time, a canister. It slammed into the field near us and popped open with a hiss, revealing a supply cache. ammo, grenades, medkits. I grabbed everything I could, passing gear to the others. The adrenaline hit hard. We were back in it. Warren grinned as he loaded a fresh energy cell. Feels like a second wind. No, I said, slamming a new mag into my rifle. It feels like vengeance. We pushed out hard. With fresh ammo and zero hesitation, we stormed their broken ranks. The surviving Zareth tried to regroup, but we hit them like hellspawn, not soldiers. Close range, face to face, eye to glowing eye. One of them aimed at me, tall, armored, sleek, their elite type. I dropped my rifle, ran at him full speed, and drove a knife into the gap under his chin plate. He tried to scream, but all that came out was that gurgling sound I'd heard 100 times. I yanked the blade out and moved on. Warren set off another of his traps, this one a tripwire that sent steel shrapnel into the enemy's backs. 2 more went down, writhing in the dirt. By the end of it, the battlefield was littered with Zareth bodies and smoking wreckage. We'd won. Barely. But we had. 7 of us were left standing. Only 7. I looked at them. The scorched faces, missing limbs, shattered armor, blood-caked boots, and I realized something deep in my gut. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about message, about sending a single unshakable truth into the stars. Humanity doesn't kneel, not for technology, not for threats, not for anything. We dragged the Zareth bodies into a pile and lit them on fire, not out of cruelty, but as a warning. To them, to whatever other species was watching. The signal went out a few hours later. Courtesy of the orbital survivor who found an old beacon still functional. We didn't say much, just coordinates, status, and a single sentence. Still holding, still human. The sky didn't look the same after that last wave. It was darker, thicker, like the atmosphere itself had been poisoned with everything we'd killed. Smoke from burning Zareth wreckage stained the clouds black. Ash drifted through the air constantly now, light gray at first, then darker, until it stuck to your skin like oil and made your throat sting when you breathed. The others were coughing more, bleeding more, but not retreating. We weren't the same either. That battle had taken too much. Warren's hands shook now. He tried to hide it, still building his bombs, still smiling like the devil, but it was there. He knew it. I knew it. The adrenaline had dried up, and all that was left was trauma stretched tight over bones. The older twin hadn't spoken in hours since her sister died. She just sat near the burnt-out comms terminal, polishing her bayonet like she was waiting for the world to come and get her. It would. It always did. And then it did. They came again, not soldiers this time. No dropships, no formations, just a sound, low and unnatural, like steel grinding against bone. It came from the horizon as the light dipped into that false red twilight we'd all grown to dread. We stood up, all of us, weapons half-loaded, eyes burning from smoke and grief. I scanned the ridge, expecting another patrol, maybe more infantry, another gunship if they had any left. But I didn't see anything, not at first, and then I realized why. They were crawling, hundreds of them, crawling on all fours. No armor, no gear, just long, pale limbs dragging across the broken earth like spiders made of bone and gristle. Their eyes glowed faintly, too many in each skull. Their mouths, if you could call them that, were cracked open with metal teeth implanted sideways like they'd been altered, not born. They weren't Zareth soldiers. They were something else, something created. "Oh," Warren whispered, backing up. "What the hell are those?" the girl finally asked, her voice hoarse. "New weapons," I said. "The Zareth couldn't beat us with machines, so now they're trying monsters." The crawlers didn't speak, didn't roar, They just advanced, climbing over debris, darting forward in bursts like animals that had forgotten what fear was. One of them moved like it had broken bones in every limb, fast and twitching, dragging what looked like a human ribcage strapped to its back as armor. I raised my rifle and fired. The first shot hit it in the shoulder. It didn't stop. The second hit it in the leg. Still didn't stop. I aimed for the head and pulled the trigger again. This time it dropped. "They don't wear armor," Gavlin said behind me, "but they don't need it." He wasn't wrong. The next 5 minutes were chaos. No formations, no tactics, just madness. They swarmed us from multiple sides, climbing up walls, digging through rubble, pulling men into tunnels like insects stripping a corpse. We fought like demons, point blank, bayonets and fists, grenades thrown so close they singed our own skin. I saw Warren go down. One of the crawlers landed on him, tearing into his side. Warren screamed and jammed a detonator into the creature's mouth. They exploded together. Flesh and flame sprayed across the field. He took 4 of them with him. One by one, they fell. Gavlin stabbed one through the neck, but another latched onto his leg, ripping through muscle. He went down swinging, slicing 2 more apart before they piled on top of him. His last shout wasn't pain. It was rage. I kept firing, barrel red hot. Blood in my mouth. My left arm was useless. Something had torn through the muscle and left it hanging by threads. I switched to my pistol, then my knife. By the time it ended, only 3 of us were left. Me. The twin. Bloodied. Bayonet missing. Her hand clutching a broken rifle like it was her spine. And an old man named Breck, who I hadn't even realized was still alive. He'd been running our back perimeter, half blind, half deaf, but stubborn enough to outlive younger men. He had a shotgun and a single eye. That was enough, apparently. The battlefield was silent again. The monsters didn't retreat. They just stopped, like they'd run out of orders. We stood there, covered in blood and pieces of what used to be men, waiting for the next wave. But nothing came. "Why'd they send those?" the twin asked. Her voice sounded small, like a child trying not to cry. "Because they're running out of options," I said. "They thought we'd break. Instead, we killed everything they sent." She didn't reply, just knelt down beside her sister's old pack and pulled out a fresh clip, shoving it into the mangled rifle like it was just another day. We didn't talk much that night. The fires kept us company. So did the dead. We burned Warren's body ourselves. Breck found an old whiskey bottle and poured a shot onto the flames. "Here's to the bastard who could make a bomb out of stale bread and rage," he muttered. The next day, the orbital survivor sent another message. "Zareth command ship has changed orbit. Something's coming." I already knew that. You could feel it in the air. Something had shifted. They weren't just trying to defeat us anymore. They were trying to erase us. The next wave would be worse. Not soldiers, not monsters, something higher. I didn't know what they'd send next. Maybe it would be some kind of psychic. Maybe an experimental AI. Or maybe just a chemical payload that would rot us from the inside. Didn't matter. We were still human. Still here. And we were ready. By the time the sun came up again, or what passed for sunrise through the smoke-thick sky, there were only 3 of us left. Me, Breck, and the last twin. And even she was more ghost than soldier now. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. She moved like death was a thing she'd already shaken hands with, and just hadn't followed through yet. Breck was patching up his leg with a piece of power cable and some duct tape. The crawler things had nearly torn his calf clean off, but the old man wouldn't stop. I told him to rest. He grunted and asked if I was going to write poetry next. We'd fortified what was left of the trench, not because we thought it would hold, but because fighting back was the only thing left that made sense. The orbital survivor hadn't sent anything since yesterday. Either they were out of juice, out of missiles, or dead. I didn't care. We were already on our last breath. All I needed was one more reason to breathe, one more shot at the enemy. And they gave it to us. Midday, the world went quiet. No engines, no wind, no birds. Not that there'd been any left alive for weeks. Just stillness. That's when the sky opened. Not like before. No atmospheric fire or bombing runs. No screaming ships falling from orbit. This time it was clean. A perfect circular tear in the clouds. And from it, a single shape descended. Not a drop pod, not a cruiser, a being. It didn't fall, it floated. 10 feet tall, smooth armor like polished bone. 4 arms folded across its chest. Its face was nothing. A blank shell with 6 tiny lights where eyes might have once been. Not glowing, just watching. Breck muttered, "Well, looks like Mama finally showed up." The thing landed without a sound, a few hundred yards from our last stand. No escort, no army. It didn't need one. I recognized it immediately. A Zareth Prime, command class, only 1 per planetary sector. Rumors said they weren't made. They were grown, genetically engineered from the best minds, best warriors, best killers the Zareth had ever produced. A mix of science and cold-blooded perfection. This one just stood there, watching. I stepped out of cover. No helmet, no dramatic armor. Just my old cracked flak vest and a rifle held together by electrical tape and spite. "You want a speech?" I shouted. "You're late. We ran out of things to kill hours ago." It didn't respond. Just began walking forward. Smooth, effortless. I raised my weapon and fired. The bullets hit. All of them. Direct center mass. And all of them dropped to the ground like they'd hit steel. Not even a flinch. Then it spoke. Its voice didn't come from a mouth. It came from everywhere. The air, the ground, the metal in our bones. "You will not win. You cannot. This is not defiance. It is delay." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "That's what you sound like?" Jesus! I was expecting something more impressive. The Zareth Prime raised one arm. A pulse rippled out, low frequency. Breck grabbed his head and fell to one knee, screaming. I turned, fired again, this time aiming for the exposed lights on its face. 2 hit, 1 cracked. The thing paused. Then it ran. Not walked, not hovered. It sprinted, faster than anything I'd seen move on 2 legs. It was on me before I could reload. I dropped my rifle, yanked my knife, went in low. We collided. It hit like a truck, but I didn't fall. I stabbed for the side of the torso, found a weak spot. The blade sank halfway in before it caught my wrist and snapped it clean. Pain exploded. I roared in its face. It raised its second arm, some kind of energy weapon built into the palm, and aimed straight at my heart. But the twin appeared from nowhere, screaming like a banshee. She slammed the broken rifle stock against the side of its head. The Zareth Prime turned, backhanded her 20 feet through the air. She hit a wall with a crack I felt in my spine. I used the distraction. Reached down. Pulled a frag grenade from my belt with my good hand. Thumbed the pin. The Prime grabbed my broken arm and squeezed. I jammed the grenade between us and shouted, "Welcome to Earth, asshole!" Boom. The explosion knocked us both apart. I hit the ground hard, coughing, chest on fire, ears ringing. The Prime wasn't dead. Not yet. But it was hurt. Its armor was cracked. Fluid leaked from its side. It staggered for the first time, looked down at the damage, like it couldn't believe it. I stood, one arm hanging useless, blood pouring from my nose and mouth. My boots were melted halfway off. But I stood. The Prime raised its weapon again. Slower this time. Then Breck fired. From behind me. Shotgun. Close range. The blast tore into the Prime's back, staggering it forward. Then another blast. And another. Breck didn't stop until the gun clicked dry. The Prime turned, chest blown open, sparks flying, and tried to lift a hand. That's when the twin reappeared, limping, mouth bleeding. She threw something. Warren's last mine. It hit the Prime's chest and stuck. Click. The explosion turned the Zereth Prime into a pile of smoking limbs and shattered pieces. Silence returned. No movement, no speech. Just the three of us. Bleeding. Barely alive. Still human. We sat down together. Right there in the ruins. Shared the last rations. 1 can of meat, half a bottle of water. Breck coughed. Think that was the boss? I nodded. That was the best they had. He chuckled. They're screwed then. The twin didn't speak. She just lit the last cigarette. Smoked it slow. Passed it to me. I took a drag, then passed it to Breck. A moment of peace, surrounded by the dead. That night, we sent one more message. From the broken comms terminal. Short, clear. Command class terminated. Still holding. No surrender. We didn't ask for evac. Didn't ask for help. We just wanted them to know we were still alive. And we'd never kneel. We didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear. That had died days ago. It was something else now. Something harder. Quieter. Like our bodies were too damn tired to collapse, but too stubborn to let go. We sat in the ruins, backs against scorched steel, passing a half-dead flashlight between us just to see each other's faces. It felt like the world had cracked open, and only 3 of us had crawled out alive. Breck was breathing heavy. Every inhale sounded like sandpaper dragging through his chest. He'd taken more damage than any of us, his ribs wrapped in electrical tape, his left boot duct-taped to the shin where the skin had split open. But he still had that same spark in his eye. That fire. The one that said, "I'll die standing before I kneel." The twin, the last twin, was different. Quiet. Withdrawn. She kept staring at the wreckage of the Zereth Prime, like it might get back up again. Her hands were raw from gripping that broken rifle stock too long. She hadn't said a word since we'd sent the last message. Me? I just sat there, listening, to the silence, to the distant crackling of flames, to the sound of a war that wasn't over, even if the bodies stopped moving. The kill confirmed what we suspected. The Zereth were desperate, that Prime had been their crown jewel, one of their untouchable pieces on the board. And we shattered it. 3 broken humans on the last line of dirt they hadn't claimed. It wasn't supposed to happen. So we knew what would come next. They wouldn't send more soldiers, or monsters, or even commanders. They'd send the cleansing, total sterilization, wipe the grid, erase all life signatures. No matter what, human, plant, animal, it all went up in flames. That was the Zereth way. If they couldn't win the ground, they'd burn it. So we had a choice. Die here, with the last stand carved into this scorched trench, or hit them first. We chose the second. Breck was the one who brought it up. You know their command ship's still circling. Has to be. It's how that Prime got here. They never drop one without direct connection. I nodded slowly. Even if it's there, how do we reach it? We don't have a launch platform. Hell, we barely have functioning lungs. He gave a broken smile. I know where we can get one. That's when he told us about Black Pit Station, a hidden orbital launcher buried 20 miles out in the collapsed mountain line. It had been decommissioned before the war, forgotten by both sides. But he'd helped wire the damn thing back when he worked for Colonial Defense years ago. It's a long shot, he said, but if it's still there and still has juice, we can launch one of their own drop pods straight into orbit. To board their command ship? I asked. No, Breck replied. To crash into it and burn them from the inside. The twin finally spoke. I'm in. No hesitation. no emotion. Just that. So we packed what we could. 2 rifles, 1 sidearm, 3 grenades, a half-empty medkit. We stripped the Zereth Prime's body for anything useful. Found a plasma core still intact, powerful, unstable, likely to explode under pressure. Perfect. We left the trench at dawn. Didn't look back. The journey to Black Pit took 2 days. 2 days of dodging patrol drones, avoiding crawler nests, and dragging our broken bodies through ash and shattered earth. The sky never cleared. The smoke was part of everything now. The air, the ground, our skin. We looked like corpses walking, but we moved like men on a mission. On the 2nd night, we found a Zereth recon unit camped along a ravine. 5 of them. Tall, armored, relaxed. Too relaxed. We took them out with silence and knives. Up close, the Zereth always looked shocked when they died. Like it never occurred to them something so primitive could end them. That arrogance. It never left their eyes, even in death. The 3rd morning, we reached the mountain. Black Pit Station was buried in its side, hidden behind a crumbling gate and a wall of rusted panels half buried by landslides. Breck guided us through, every step slower than the last. He was fading, and we all knew it. Inside, the air was worse than outside. Mold, dust, old death. But the systems were still there, broken, flickering, but intact. Breck got to work. We propped him up with wires under his arms, guiding him to the central console while the twin and I scouted the hangar for a pod. We found one. A Zereth assault pod. Half destroyed, lodged into the floor like it had crashed during the early siege. It would never fly again. But it didn't need to. It just needed to launch. "Still got the plasma core?" Breck called out, coughing blood. I held it up. "Ready to blow!" We loaded it into the pod's rear chamber and wired the detonator manually. The twin handled it like she'd done it before. Didn't say a word. Just worked with cold, deliberate precision. Finally, Breck slumped back in the pilot's seat. His skin had gone gray. "Set the timer," I said. He shook his head. "I'll fly it." "Like hell you will." "You've got more left in you," he said. "I'm already dead. I can feel it. My chest's filling up. This is the end for me, either way." I looked at the twin. She didn't argue. Neither did I. So we helped him into the straps. Rigged the core. Set the nav system to lock onto the command ship's orbit. "I'll keep the comm open," Breck said, voice trembling. "You'll hear me go." We stood back as the system began to power up. Lights flickered to life across the station, old engines coughing like the mountain itself was waking up for one final scream. Breck gave us a thumbs up. Then the countdown began. 60 seconds. The hatch sealed shut. The platform rumbled. And then, with a roar that split the sky, the pod launched, straight up, tearing through clouds and smoke and fire. We listened. 15 minutes later, the comm crackled. Breck's voice, weak but proud. "Made it. Docked clean. They don't know I'm inside." Pause. "I see them, all of them, cowards, running, not fighting." Silence. Then, in his last breath, "Light it up." The explosion lit the sky. Not like a bomb. Like vengeance, the Zereth command ship tore open like a steel flower, burning, breaking, spiraling down in pieces. The shockwave hit the earth a minute later, shaking the mountain and knocking us both flat. When it cleared, the sky looked clean. For the first time in weeks. No ships, no drones, no more threats, just the stars. We sat there, covered in dust, watching the ash finally start to fall slower. The twin looked at me. Her voice was raw. "We won?" I nodded. "For now." She didn't smile. Neither did I. There wasn't anything left to smile about, but we were still breathing, and the bastards weren't. That was enough. The silence that followed was worse than the war. There were no more Zereth in the sky. No command voices polluting the airwaves. No drones humming through the canyons or crawlers clawing at our boots in the dark. The skies, once heavy with black smoke, fire trails, and burning wreckage, looked open, empty, clean. But it didn't feel like peace. It felt like aftermath, the kind of quiet that settles after a massacre, the kind where the screaming's over but the echoes are still hanging in the air, waiting for someone to say it's finally done. No one did. There were only two of us now, me and the last twin. She never told me her name. I never asked, felt wrong, like names belonged to another life. A softer one. We stayed at Black Pit Station for another day, long enough to rig a signal beacon using the last of the Zereth tech we'd salvaged. She was the one who figured out how to tie the power core into the satellite uplink. I watched her work in silence, one hand pressed to my ribs where the bruising had turned black and deep. Breathing was pain now. Everything was pain. But we didn't say it out loud. What was the point? The signal was simple. No politics, no begging, no fancy diplomacy, just coordinates, status, and a message. Command ship destroyed, survivors still holding, Earthborn, unbroken. We didn't expect anyone to answer. We weren't even sure who still could. But the signal needed to be sent. Not for rescue, for the record. To let the rest of humanity, if there was any left, know what we did here, what we paid, and that we didn't die with our knees in the dirt. We left the station the next morning, walking north toward the dead horizon. No vehicles, no transport, just two broken souls moving through the wasteland with rifles that barely fired and wounds that would never fully close. The land was different now. Quieter. The Zereth were gone. No signs of regrouping. No final retaliation. It was like once their command ship went down, the rest scattered like bugs from a burning house. Cowards in the end. That's the thing about a species like that. They fought with superiority, not survival. They expected clean victories, not resistance. They didn't know how to suffer. We did. That's why we won. About 10 miles out, we found what was left of a human outpost. Buried under sand and rubble, the bodies had long since decayed, bones scorched and stripped. But the comms tower was intact. She climbed it while I kept watch. Took her half a day to get it working. And when it came back online, just a flicker of static and then a voice. It didn't sound human. It was Zereth, faint, distorted, like it was bouncing between dead satellites. A language I didn't understand fully but recognized instantly. She played it back 3 times before looking at me. "What does it mean?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's a distress call from one of their colony fleets." I narrowed my eyes. "You mean survivors?" She nodded. "They're not regrouping. They're retreating." I let that sit for a moment. The mighty Zereth Empire crawling away from the edge of the system, afraid, not of our weapons, not of our tech, but of us. Humans. We didn't have ships anymore, or armies, or even a government that worked. But we had this one undeniable truth they couldn't erase. We didn't break. We spread the signal to other bands, open frequencies, old smuggler channels, even dead military networks, just in case some rogue AI still listened in the dark. And then we added a message of our own. "We're still here. You lost. Tell your kind. Tell every species that watches. Earth fights to the last man and then keeps fighting." After that, we moved. Town to town, ruin to ruin, looking for signs of life, and slowly, we started finding it. Not much at first. A farming family hiding in an old sub-level bunker, surviving off hydroponic vats and canned meat. A former medic operating a makeshift clinic in a cave network. A dozen kids living in the underground rail tunnels beneath a broken city, led by a scarred woman with one arm and a shotgun. None of them had hope left. Until they saw us. until they heard what we did. And when they heard about Breck, about how he flew a stolen pod into a command ship's gut and lit up their god like a bonfire. That's when the spark came back. One of the kids, maybe 12 years old, asked me something. "Are we safe now?" I looked him in the eyes. "No." He swallowed hard. "Then what happens next?" I bent down, handed him one of our last cartridges. "You reload. You wait. And when they come back, and they will, you show them what it means to be human." That's when I realized this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It's been 6 months since the last Zareth scream faded from the sky. The planet's still scarred, cracked in places, cities burned black, oceans poisoned in patches, skies that don't always remember how to turn blue. But we're here, building again. And every time another survivor group picks up our signal, they send their own message back. Still holding, still human. We've started calling ourselves the Groundborn, the last defenders, the legacy that refused to rot. Some of us wear old uniforms, others wear scraps. Doesn't matter, the emblem's the same, a cracked helmet, a blood-stained fist. And a single word beneath it, unbowed. The twin, she never told me her name, but everyone else started calling her Ash. Fitting. She rose from it, lived in it, carried fire in her bones. She runs the Western Resistance now. Quiet, but brutal. Trains kids half her size to shoot straighter than Zareth soldiers ever did. Me? I don't lead. I don't command. I just walk, from town to town, sharing the story, reminding people of the trenches, the screams, the laughter before we reloaded, and the prime that fell not from strategy, but from rage. When I tell them what Breck did, they listen. When I tell them what Gavlin, Warren, and Rigg gave up, they remember. And when I tell them we never surrendered, they stand a little straighter. That's enough for me. The war will come again. Maybe not from the Zareth. Maybe not from the stars. But it always does. And when it does, they'll remember what happened here. What happened when Earth was asked to kneel, and laughed instead. I never thought I'd live long enough to see the galaxy fear our name. But here we are. It started with whispers. Zareth colonies in outer space, abandoned. Supply convoys rerouted to avoid the Sol system. Refugee ships carrying the last of their broken elite crawling into distant sectors, trading information for mercy. Every one of them carried the same warning, spoken in hushed voices to alien leaders who'd never dared look toward Earth before. Don't go there. Don't provoke them. The humans don't die properly. They didn't say we were brave, or noble, or honorable. They said we were dangerous, unpredictable, irrational, unkillable, and that's exactly how we wanted it. The Groundborn movement grew faster than we expected. It spread not because of orders or propaganda, but because the truth had teeth and survivors were hungry to bite back. We became stories first, then symbols, then something more. I was walking through the ruins of what used to be a Zareth outpost near the equator when the first envoy came. Not human. Not Zareth. Something different. A small gray species called the Halari. Thin-bodied. No eyes. They spoke through vibration. There were 3 of them. No weapons, no escort. They found me sitting outside a derelict tank with a half-cleaned rifle across my lap. I hadn't shaved in weeks. One of my boots was held together by copper wire. I probably looked more like a raider than a leader. But they bowed anyway. "We've come to speak to the one who led the stand," the first said in translated binary. I told them I didn't lead anything. I just survived. They told me that was exactly what made me dangerous. The Halari weren't there to challenge us. They were there to understand us. They asked what made us resist so hard, even when the numbers were hopeless, the weapons outmatched, the planet crumbling beneath our feet. I gave them the only answer that mattered. Because no one gets to tell us when to die. They didn't speak for a long time after that, just stared at the sky. And then one of them pulled something from their cloak, a carved plate etched in their native runes. They handed it to me. "Your world is now marked on the stellar map," he said, "as Red Class Hostile." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that supposed to be a threat?" He shook his head. "A warning. For others." Then they left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. The message was clear. The universe now knew who we were, and more importantly, what we'd done. Ash found me 2 days later. Still didn't call herself that. But it had stuck. She looked older. Not in years, but in weight. She carried command now, a dozen cells under her watch, cities rebuilding under ground-born banners, engineers salvaging orbital junk and welding together new ships in underground docks. She handed me a data pad. "This is what you started," she said. I scrolled through it. Fleet logs, survivor reports, new colonies broadcasting under the unbroken tag, even planets we didn't know had humans on them, people who'd been abducted, enslaved, scattered across the stars, were starting to respond. "Still holding. Still human." Ash looked at me hard. "We're not just survivors anymore." "No," I said. "We're the reason no one forgets what Earth is." She handed me a hard drive. Old tech, heavy. "What's this?" "A record," she said, "of everything. The whole war, every message, every name, every death." I stared at it. "You want me to write it?" "No, you already did." She paused, then added, "I just want you to finish it." So I did. I started writing. Not like a soldier, not like a hero, just like a man who watched too many brothers bleed into the ground for nothing but pride and rage. I wrote about the first strikes, the trenches, the laughing before the last charge, the crawlers, the prime, Breck's voice over comms before the stars went red. I wrote it all, because the universe has a short memory, and we're the scar that won't fade. 3 months later, a new ship touched down near the northern wastes. It wasn't Zareth. It wasn't groundborn. It was unknown. Dark plating, smooth design, no weapons showing, but it broadcasted a request. "We come in peace. We come to listen." The ship was full of representatives. Dozens. Different races. Some I recognized, some I didn't. They were from systems that had heard about what happened here, and wanted to know if the stories were true. I didn't greet them with parades. I took them to the trenches. Let them walk the same dirt that swallowed our brothers. Let them see the burned wall where we carved our final message in steel. "We didn't surrender," some of them cried. Some stood in silence. One asked why we didn't evacuate, even when it was clear Earth was lost. I told them, because Earth is us. You don't leave what you are. You fight for it, even when it stops breathing. They asked if we'd forgive the Zareth. I said, "We already did." They looked shocked. Then I added, "But we'll never forget, and we'll never forget who stood with us and who watched in silence." The message was received. Loud. Clear. Galactic diplomacy shifted after that. The big alliances, those bloated bureaucracies that ignored our pleas in the beginning, started changing their tone. Suddenly, Earth wasn't just some war-torn rock. It was a symbol, a warning, and a promise. Now, it's been a year. The scars are still fresh. Some cities still burn at night. Some names still echo when I close my eyes. But we're not broken anymore. We're becoming something else. A species the stars remember. Not for conquest, not for power, but because we were the ones who stood in front of extinction. Laughed in its face, and reloaded. Final entry. Groundborn Archive, AO1, date, redacted location. Earth, Sol System survivor. Tag unbowed groundborn message to any species receiving this transmission. We are not your enemy. We do not seek your land, your sky, or your stars. But if you come for our home, if you come for our people, if you send your gods, your monsters, your machines, just remember this. We've killed gods before, and when the last round is chambered, when our lungs are full of ash, when your voice demands surrender, we won't argue. We'll just laugh and reload. End of transmission.